Having had my granddaughters around this week reminded me that children come with expectations, not only theirs, but ours. Try as we might, we have expectations for them, hopes, dreams. Sometimes they're very simple: a good life, happiness, a good job, a home, success. Sometimes they're expectations of ourselves, like, I hope I don't kill them by the time they get through junior high. Sometimes they're more grandiose: a professional athlete, a world famous artist, an award winning author. Sometimes they're misplaced expectations based on things that we were unable to fulfill in our lives. We project them upon them. That's an awful burden sometimes. Sometimes they're unspoken. I remember when my mother was dying, she repeated in her final conversation with me a line that had been almost a refrain of my life. I wish you had lived up to your potential. I never did know what those expectations she had of me were and what my potential was supposed to be. Children come with expectations. And time again, they manage to dash our expectations at them. Not necessarily maliciously, but simply because they have their own lives to live. They are their own people. They have their own hopes and dreams. One of the hardest things, I think, for a parent who loves their children is to let them go and to find those realities, those hopes and dreams, especially when we know the consequences of some of their actions, some of their choices. Yes, the harder part about love is the letting go. There was a marvelous Broadway musical called Children of Eden that was based on the early chapters of Genesis. And that's one of the songs that came from that musical, sung throughout the musical as people watched the generations make their mistakes. But one of the more poignant moments is when God sings that song. God had expectations of our primordial parents. What would have happened if they had never eaten of that fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? What if they had remained in paradise as God had intended? What a different world it would be. But they didn't. And they had to face the consequences. Not so much as punishment, but as reality. Their choices meant that paradise was lost. They now knew good and evil. There could be no more paradise. Life would be hard. Reality outside of the garden was rough. And so we have those early chapters of Genesis working out that reality, that new life, that harshness. But even in the midst of that, even as God has to let them go because he created them with the ability to choose. God never abandons them. He clothes them. He protects them. He goes with them. He wanders over half the known world. He spends 40 years in the desert with them, listening to their complaints, their frustrations. He goes into exile when their actions bring the nation to the ground. And he takes them home. But most intimately, God makes God's self real to us in the form of Jesus the Christ. In that moment when God takes on human flesh and becomes as one with us, God establishes a solidarity unlike anything else. Both that God would understand what it is to be human, but also that we might see God more clearly and to recognize God's presence even in the midst of the letting go, of letting us have our way. How hard that is for God to watch us mess it up time after time after time. And we are so good at it. And we face the consequences over and over and over again. It is as if we don't learn a thing about our past and about those who have gone before us. We seem hell-bent on repeating the same stupid stuff. Oh, we are good at messing up. But the good news is we can't screw it up. Despite our desire for our own control, despite our inability to listen to God, to follow God's instructions for a better life, God does not abandon us, but goes with us. It announces in Jesus the Christ that despite all of our messing it up, we can't screw it up. We cannot destroy the relationship between God and us. God will not leave us, despite our own idiocy and our own desire for control, for our own way, for our own hopes and dreams. God is with us. He loves us so much that he's willing to let us go and find our way, but in the end, to bring us back home. Well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into the kingdom.